If you've ever reacted in a way that didn't feel like the real you, you've experienced what it's like to be led by a part. Because there's a difference between having emotions and being led by them. Today we're going to look at leading from your core self. So let's start today's video with talking about the concept of self. I tend to refer to self with a capital S, and it's largely influenced by the model that I lean into most strongly in working with parts, which is the internal family systems model. But today's video, I guess, will blend a bit of my own interpretation and other learnings that I've absorbed over the years that go both within psychology and more into the metaphysical or spiritual traditions as well. And this concept of self is certainly one that is not unique to the internal family systems model. In fact, internal family systems refers to what I'm calling self as self-energy. You will also come across the concept of higher self in reference to this core essence of who we are, this highest, I guess, version of who we are underneath all of the programming. And that's, I guess, the way that I tend to look at the essence of who we are. It's who we are and were before we took on beliefs, wounds, and programming. Some people may be tempted to refer to self as soul. I'll leave that up to you. I'll try not to influence you either way, because words for all of us have a history, and the labels really are not as important as the experience. So hopefully you can set the labels to the side a little bit today if any of those labels of self, self-energy, higher self or soul don't resonate, and just experience where I'm going with this today as far as the concept of working from self. So let's start with what operating from your core self is. Firstly, it's not suppressing your emotions. It's not being calm all the time. It's not feeling detached from your inner experiences. So that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, instead of having aspects of you running the show or blending with you, you are having an experience of observing your thoughts, your feelings, the parts of yourself, rather than them simply taking over you. I like to use the term hijacking as a term, because it's somewhat of an involuntary process where a part of us simply takes over rather than freely choosing. Whereas to operate from self or self-leadership involves maintaining that sense of separation between oneself and a part that's showing up in any given moment. This little diagram that I thought might help explain a little. So I'll come to the bottom one in a second. So let's just start with the controlling part. So that would be an example of a part that's a protector that some of you watching may have show up from time to time. It's only trying to keep you safe from some kind of emotional harm generally. The controlling part is not trying to make things worse, even though protective parts can certainly not necessarily get the job done that they're seeking to get done, or get it done with some negative consequences, but the intention is always positive behind any kind of protective part. And so that the arrow here, the one that's blending into the circle, that's me demonstrating this concept of hijacking or blending. And what we really wish to do, and we'll go to the bottom circle as well for a moment too. So that's referencing maybe a more fragile or vulnerable part of ourselves, a wounded part getting activated. So let's say there's a scared part that blends in and takes over the way we react to a moment. And again, there's the arrow there, blending in with self. Whereas what we ideally can learn to do is to observe or interact with the part without it taking over us, which is why I've got double-headed arrows here as the preferred way of operating with parts of ourselves. Easier said than done, but that's certainly what models like internal family systems therapy offer as ways of bringing balance back to our system and putting self in that leadership position where we are operating from a stable, calm, steady, non-reactive essence of who we are, while still honouring that we have thoughts, feelings, parts being activated in us. If you follow the IFS model, Richard Schwartz refers to self-energy under 8 words starting with the letter C. Let's see if I can remember them. Calm, curious, compassionate, connected, confident, correct, courageous, sees things with clarity, and creative. So they're words that Schwartz has chosen to use. Sorry, I didn't reference that on my diagram. I highlighted 2 key, I guess, qualities of self that I tend to emphasize in the way that I do my, I guess, blended version of IFS, or my take on IFS, which is seeing the self as non-judgmental and loving. And when I use the word loving, I'm not referring to the kind of love that we might associate with a romantic relationship or, I guess a give and take, conditional kind of loving. I'm referring to self as having this quality of unconditional love for life, love for self, love for others. And it's unconditional in that it doesn't require certain circumstances to be present. And my take on it, and certainly someone like Richard Schwartz, who's gone into prisons and found the most, I guess, violent and discarded human beings on the planet, and wondered whether even they had this sense of self underneath all of it. And he maintains, and I tend to align with his belief, that every human being has that there. Even the most narcissistic, violent, disgusting people in humanity, well, certainly disgusting from the point of view of how they've behaved. And the way I look at it is that there is this self, this light, like a light globe that's on underneath all of the layers of, you could say, like a black, thick tape just covering that light globe up in many people, well, sorry, I shouldn't say many, in a small percentage of people in society. But that does not mean that underneath all of that, that self isn't there. And Schwartz trained himself to not react to any individual's parts lashing out at him, and was able to find in every single case of every human he's engaged with, as far as I know anyway, based on what I've heard him say, has not found anyone that does not have self, or self-energy, as he calls it, at their core. So we all have that. We were that before we were programmed, as I said earlier. Those innocent little children we were. If you think of a 2 or a 3-year-old child, let's say they've had a fantastic start to life, nothing scary's happened, nothing sort of been drilled into them too early, that little 2 or 3-year-old is much more likely to go out into the world curiously, asking questions with clarity, wanting to connect with people, showing compassion for people, animals, etc. That's the essence of who we are, until, unfortunately, we get feedback from the world that maybe it's not okay to be that way. So that child might be told not to talk to strangers because of stranger danger. Now, that's fair enough, because unfortunately there are people in society that aren't safe, and so that child needs to learn to not be as open, say things as clearly, or connect with every human being they come in contact with, unfortunately. But if our world was a different place, where we were already in unity consciousness, and all of us were all, in this thing called life together and working together, then we wouldn't need to develop these layers of protection to, cover over the core self, or hijack the core self, and protect us from the threats in the world. So, so self is that the state where we're able to calmly and curiously engage with the outside world and our inner world at the same time, regardless of what's showing up externally or internally. And certainly that's not easy to do for a lot of us, because of how automatically these parts of us, particularly the protective parts, take over when there is a perception that we're under some kind of threat, emotional threat generally rather than physical, but these parts have just learnt to do their job, and so to stay in this space of self and observing the part rather than becoming the part can take some practice and some time interacting with these parts to get to a stage where they don't hijack, where they don't just take over self. And so, as I always like to do in these videos, I'd like to guide you through a little sample of experiencing self separate from a part. And as I state in these videos, it's, to me, more powerful to have an experience of the concepts I'm speaking to rather than simply taking in the information. So even if you've sampled something similar to what I'm about to offer in this little guided exercise, little guided meditation, perhaps you'll still join me anyway. And generally I find that closing your eyes for these exercises helps to engage more with the internal experience, but it's not a necessity. Lowering your eyes or focusing on a spot will also help cut down the sensory input so that you can turn your awareness inwards. So I invite you to do that. Either close your eyes or lower your eyes or focus on a point. And take a breath or two just to get into a state of of witnessing or observing yourself in this moment, and turn your awareness inwards and bring to mind a situation that feels frustrating to you. Find either something you're frustrated with in yourself, could be a habit, not going for anything too intense here, just something mild to moderate. Could be a frustration with another human being in your life, in your past. Or it could be a frustration with the world in general. And just go to that frustration, allow the awareness of that frustration to really be with you, and notice what happens. Maybe you start to get some kind of change of sensations in the body. That's the most common starting point. Notice whether there's any kind of tightening, churning, pressure, or any other sensations. Stay with that. Stay with those sensations and locate them specifically in your body. If you're not getting sensations and you're getting some thoughts instead, images or self-talk, the voice inside of you, locate where it feels like the voice inside is coming from. Your throat, the middle of your skull, the front, the back. If it's images, where those images feel like they're playing out. Maybe it's both, sensations and words and images. But for you to have just been able to locate those sensations or those words and images, there has to be another you experiencing the locating. There has to be another you that is witnessing, that is noticing. And so become aware of that separation. Just like watching a screen involves you as an observer of the screen, you are doing the same now with whatever part's been activated. You are observing the part, or you can choose to observe the part rather than be the part. There is a you that is not the part, and that is always there, witnessing, noticing, observing, non-judgmentally, curiously. It's not running any agenda. It's not trying to fix anything, problem solve. Not trying to do anything. In fact, this you that's taking it all in is just being. This is self. This is your core essence. It has been your core since the day you were born. Simply experiencing life. No agenda at all. Just experiencing. And this you has the capacity to lead the parts. But unfortunately, the parts don't necessarily know that. These parts of you maybe think they've got to do it on their own, that they've got to protect the self. Because when the parts got activated, some of these protective parts in particular, you were younger, you were more fragile, you were more vulnerable, or less capable. So they are still stuck in a way of doing things that isn't up to date with how you are now. But for now, just acknowledge that part and trust that the frustration that you were able to find, it's most likely got a protective function. It's most likely a part of you that is just trying to do a job for you. Maybe protect you from being taken advantage of, maybe try and bring fairness into your life, maybe just protect you from being hurt. You don't need to know right now, but you can acknowledge this part and potentially come back to it. But the key thing to note is that you are more than the part. This isn't all of you. You probably already know that. But hopefully now you've experienced it. So, start to bring your awareness back to where you are in time and space, honouring that you've connected with a part and unblended from it. And start to tune back into where you are in time and space and come back into the room, open your eyes if you had them closed. So, thank you if you chose to participate in that. Hopefully you can see that your parts don't need to be eliminated. They just need to be led. And the process for doing so firstly involves getting to know them, listening to them, understanding that there isn't ill intentions behind any of these parts of yourself, whether they be protective parts, presumably like the one that we were just touching on then, or a vulnerable wounded part that's just crying out for support and is stuck holding on to wounds and emotions, beliefs that it doesn't know how to relieve itself of. And so being curious, getting to know them, understanding protectors' purpose, or finding wounded parts and helping them to not have to hold the wounds that they've held for so long is very much achievable and a very respectful way of working with yourself. And it really is the way to bring love to yourself. There's many ways of bringing love to oneself, but to interact with parts of you with that kind of care and compassion and respect and neutrality is, to me, the utmost act of love towards oneself, to treat your parts in that way, even the ones that seem like they're dark or problematic. If you can still bring compassion and love to those parts can be brought into balance. And it's hard at this point not to, well, firstly, point you as the viewer, if you're interested in doing more of this work and you're not familiar with it, to seek out, I would say, and IFS therapist. Even though I don't want to go into sales mode, yes, I do that work, and you can work with me through my website, and I'll also I'm also running a program that will include teaching people how to do their own parts work, amongst other powerful experiences to evolve into that, hopefully that best version of yourself, and to do the work on oneself over the course of a period of time, rather than expecting real magical quick fixes, because I think there are a lot of people out there selling those. I'm not going to advertise that I have any magic that fixes everything. Not that we're broken anyway, but that brings balance really quickly. But I feel fortunate that I've gathered some really amazing methodologies, tools, wisdoms over my 20 plus year career and personal growth journey to offer some of those back to others. So you can express your interest about doing work like that with me through my website if you're interested. But I'm not on this video to sell you something. I'm on this video to remind you, if you'd forgotten, that you touched on in today's exercise is the core essence of who you are, or if you haven't experienced that sense of you the way you did just then, well, I'm obviously very privileged to introduce you to that core self. And when you see yourself as none of your parts, not the critic, not the anxiety, not the controlling part, none of those things, you are the essence, the self that interacts with those parts, you can bring yourself into coherence. Thank you.